Thank you again for tuning in. This is week 2 of A Healthy Mind and Body, and I'm glad that you all could be here again. Many thanks for paying me with your attention. I hope that, like I said, everybody was able to get last week's audio. Make sure I have your email in the chat. And before we begin this week, I just want to do a quick little recap of last week because the sessions actually flow into one another. So last week we learned that the scientific expression of God is unified consciousness. And so you'll begin to hear the word consciousness used more and more, within the media or just within books or how people are, trying to articulate life itself and being. And so because I have a lot of people with who are religious or have religious backgrounds, I just, will keep interjecting things that you should keep in alignment with the verbiage. And so, like I said, we learned that the scientific expression of God is unified consciousness. This consciousness, it dwells in the heart, and its main purpose is charity. The main purpose of the heart is charity. And that was a big point that I don't want you guys to forget because consciousness is in the heart and the heart's purpose is charity. That means charity is nourishing for our consciousness. And that means it's pleasing to God and thus nourishing to our health. And so we'll keep revisiting that topic as well. So there is a saying that the only evidence of God that man has seen is that in which, he witnessed through somebody else. And so that's another reason why I'll keep bringing up the word charity, because that's how we know people have to actually allow themselves to be a vessel and allow themselves to be used by God so that somebody else can have that experience through that interaction with them. And it's not to say that you can't experience God directly, but when God begins to work for you, give you a house, car, whatever you may have asked for, somebody built it, somebody drove it to the lot, all of these different things. So we're all working together in this, like I said, unified consciousness. And so consciousness not only exists within our physiology, but it is the essence of the physiology. So it composes everything. So we'll say like God exists in the heart, but it's also a part of every single cell in the body as well. And we'll go a little bit more in depth with that too this week. So last week we looked at consciousness within our individual physiologies. We were looking at it as the God in us. And I separated this consciousness into 4 pieces or attributes. And so we talked about the spirit, the mind, the emotions, and the body. And I told you that these 4 things are what I'm referring to when I use the term physiology as opposed to body, because our physiology extends past just the flesh. So I gave these 4 pieces some hierarchy when we discussed it on last week. And I don't want that to confuse anybody because they all do they really work together, those 4 pieces, including the environment. But the separation was to be able to describe how something that is unseen manifests into the physical. So we discussed the spirit essence, which is most closely related to the unseen parts of consciousness that we know, that we know exist. We know that our spirit is the essence of what we call God. And that's something that we'll dive deeper on today. But I want to make sure we sum it up last week. So back to the recap. We discussed the mind being a processor for consciousness. We discussed the emotions being receptors, and we discussed the physical body being the materialized manifestations. And the point was to express that there are opportunities to recognize imbalances within your physiology before they take physical form in the body as a detectable illness. So we also briefly discussed a few examples of the journeys we can go on in our mind and in our emotions that actually create these imbalances, and how our perception and our accountability can remedy those imbalances. So just to sum up that portion, what I was alluding to there is that when we have unchecked triggers, one of the examples that I was given was being in traffic or road rage. So, right. So when we have unchecked triggers over and over again, that becomes a mood. So we can become moody, based on all these triggers. And those moods, that can become a temperament where we like, oh, that person, they just like that. Like, oh, they always mad. Like that's their temperament. They're always anxious or whatever the case is. But those temperaments can then develop into depression. It can develop into cancer. It can develop into a fibroid. It can develop into high blood pressure. And so, does any of this mean you're a bad person? I know I used the example of road rage. No, it doesn't mean that. Road rage is just an example. And your response to a trigger may not even be rage. That's not the case with everybody. Sometimes, your trigger is to be offended all the time. Every time somebody do something, you may take offense to it. So that may be how you respond to that trigger. So even being a really nice, extremely passive person, that can also, set you up. And so when we were talking about last week about charity, and I was telling you, just because you're giving something to somebody doesn't mean that you're doing it cheerfully, because even though it may be your pleasure to do, it may also be an obligation, or it may satisfy some condition. But when we're talking about like going to serve the homeless or something like that, I mean, and don't get me wrong, because even nowadays, we've all been online and we see people walking around with videos helping people. So sometimes it's for your image or sometimes it's for likes. But when you do it and you go help somebody and you don't really have to tell nobody about it, that's just, something that you're going to go do. We know that is more in alignment with constituting as charity, or constituting as that thing that we're discussing as pleasing to God, nourishing for the body, and can really take us a long way when we're talking about keeping the spirit balance. So going into week 2. Week 2, we're talking about the healthy manifestations and the power of positive thinking. So the focus this week, out of those 4 groups that we discussed, spirit, mind, emotions, and the body, this week we're kind of just on the spirit and the mind. So first, let's talk about manifestation. A lot of people have this idea that they will receive their reward just when they get to heaven, right? That's the saying. Or I've also heard of, at the end of life, your heart will be weighed against a feather. And if your heart is lighter than a feather, that will determine your fate. Or people feel like a recollection of the totality of their life will be measured at the end, and that's going to determine like some worthiness. And so, we've all probably heard people have this saying. The saying is, God knows my heart. And the funny thing about it is, usually when you hear people say this saying, God knows my heart, it's usually following um an error, or it's following a mistake. But let's explore some more instantaneous manifestations. And so when I say instantaneous manifestations, I mean what we're going to experience right now, real time in our life, and not necessarily integrity just as it relates to what will happen in our afterlife. So a common question that I'll get from clients, or a comment that I'll get from clients is, I really want to manifest. Like, how do I manifest this abundant life, or this healthy life, or even tangible things? I want to manifest the car. I want to manifest the house. And so what I always tell people is like, you already know how to manifest. Manifesting is innate. That's something that we're all doing all the time. It's just a matter of, accountability at that point. So when you look at your life as it is right now, do you understand that your thoughts, beliefs, ideas, your spirit, your body, your environment, all of these things shaped your present experience? So the choices that you made and the thoughts that you thought are the reason why you have what you have, or you are where you are at this time. And it's not to say that that's not influenced by others at times. It is. But when we take true control, like true power over our lives, we want to become more accountable without, it's always a co-creation, but we want to think about our own personal influence. And so this is why religion is relevant. It's a discipline, it's a spiritual discipline. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for discipline to make conscious manifestations, make the things that we want to happen, and not just be on the receiving end or any type of victimhood about this is what's going on in my life. And so I would say for me personally, like, I'm not I'm not just going to wait till I get to heaven to see the fruits of my labor, my discipline, my high vibrational thoughts. I'm doing those things and I want them to have a more instantaneous manifestation. And so when you're in alignment, you can begin to call in what you want, health, wealth, whatever, into your existence. And so if you say, hey, well, I'm living a righteous life according to what I believe. So I feel like I should have these things. Feel like I should have this health and wealth and be able to bring that in more instantaneously. And so I'll ask you a couple of things. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm multitasking. I'm sorry. I'm not going to forget where I am. My kid's getting in the car. Okay, y'all. My apologies. Cameron and Jackson, they're tuned in with us. We're at flag football today. And so, where I was here, I was just saying, when you're in alignment, you can begin to call whatever it is you want to call in your life into an existence. And so, the thing is figuring out, are you actually in alignment? Are you actually in alignment? And so, if you say, hey, I'm living a righteous life, but I still don't have XYZ, or I still don't have these experiences, the first question I usually ask is, do you need it? Whatever the thing is that you're asking for, you think you need, do you need it? Do you really need it? Do you just want it? You know what I'm saying? Like, is God saying no, or is God saying not right now, or go another way? And then the other thing that I say is, are you being patient? Because patience is truly a virtue. And so I do pray a different type of prayer these days, because when I'm asking, I'm talking to God and asking, for whatever it is I'm trying to receive or call in, I'm asking it based on what's the best for everybody. What's the best for everybody involved? And that kind of means comfortable with a no. That means being comfortable with receiving a rejection sometime, and still praising God for that unseen, protection that you're getting when you're asking for that thing that you may not really even truly be ready for. So you have to trust God, and in trusting God, you have to be patient. And then a lot of times I'm also seeing that it's not the lack of trust in God that creates the disconnect in the spirit. A lot of times it's the lack of trust in self. And sometimes you have to rediscover, your self-worth, and do you actually feel worthy of what was requested. And so if you have like a specific spiritual discipline that may have rules or guidelines or things you need to follow, and then you're not following them, then you may begin to, in your subconscious mind, not feel worthy. And so I'm going to give you an example. Let's say, within your Christian belief, you you've been taught over and over again from childhood that it is a sin to fornicate, and it is a sin to shack up. And you are doing both of those things whilst asking God to, increase your income and give you a better job and all of these things. And so even though in the common world it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for this to happen. It's not uncommon for you to still get the blessings and all of those things. But what I'm saying is it does create a psychological block. So when we're talking about the spirit body and we're talking about manifesting, if you say that you believe a thing and then you don't do what you say you believe and you haven't figured out in your mind some kind of workaround for that being okay, there's going to exist a block that will actually impede the process of you being able to manifest the things that you want, because that block sits right there in your self-worth, where you're not feeling worthy. And whether it's your religion or whether it's your own self-talk or your own relationship with yourself as to the reason why you saying, hey, these are the ways that I want to be disciplined, but then you don't follow any of those disciplines. Okay, we gonna get back. I done got away from my notes, y'all. I'm sorry. So the question is, have you truly done your part, or are you just relying on, like the saying says, God knows my heart? And we can look at this if, you asking for something, or you're trying to manifest something, you're trying to bring something into fruition. Between the time where you asked for it and you're in that space where you've not received it yet, what are you doing? My brother, his first sermon, what will you do in the meantime? I'll never forget. And so if in the meantime you just complaining, then that could become problematic. We'll talk about it, because if you are complaining about what you don't have, so let's say you need to manifest some money, and in the meantime of you getting this money, every day you wake up and you think about not having that money, or this person or that person owe me, or whatever is standing in the way, and that is what is taking up most of your focus, then that's where your energy is. Your energy is on lack. And so you won't be able to get those things that you're really asking for. You're actually repelling them with the thought of continually saying, I don't have it, I don't have it, I don't have it. And so there's this saying in church, like a couple of them, we'll say things like, you need to praise God in advance. You need to thank God like it's already done. And in doing this, you actually change your vibrational frequency. Once you get in this energy of being excited about something that's been done in your life, and you're in that energy, then you're going to attract that energy. So you'll pull in that experience. So I had a friend, she used to always say things like, she came to my house one time and I was like, yeah, I want to put one of those little hammock swings over here. And she'll be like, thank you, universe, for Ashley's hammock swing. And the first time she did it, it caught me off guard, but it really truly became like the sweetest thing ever, to where I started doing that to speak things into existence in my life, so that I'm not creating this lack experience. I don't mean to, but because I'm still thinking about what I don't have, or I'm still worrying about something, or I'm still anxious about something, it's kind of doing the opposite of trusting God. And it's not just something I'm telling you, it's a physiological process that happens in your body that affects your digestive system, your gut health, your brain function, and all of these different things. It gets that deep. And so, excuse me. Oh, there was another thing. I didn't want to lose my thought on that one. And one of my good friends, she's actually on the line right now. And so one of the things that she and I discussed last week is long suffering. So I wanted to bring that in here, because when we talk about um, attracting and being in the right vibrations and being in the energy and talking about praising God in advance, and we talk about feeling grateful, and we say, man, how do you hold this energy this long to wait for divine timing? How are you going to stay positive and thanking God, for 3 years, 5 years, or however long it's going to take, and keeping your integrity about yourself? And so that word was coming up again for me as I was speaking with Miss Pat, long suffering, about being a bigger person, being a wiser person. A lot of people look at that turning the other cheek, synonymous with some level of naivety. But, we know how to be wise. And you kind of have to overstand situations. That's the word that I like to use, versus understand. Because sometimes you understand that the person you're talking to, they don't understand. They may not really be allowing God to use them like maybe you allow God to use you. You're not, their consciousness may not be expanded to where yours is. So you have to be able to still say, I can be patient. You know, I could be a pillar. I could wait. I could still speak positivity, even though it hasn't happened yet. Of course, there's plenty of stories, biblical and not, of people who had to, you know, weather a storm, weather a situation. One of the sayings that I like to always refer to is, good captains are not made on calm waters. And so I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that little tidbit. But something that we're going to talk about when we're talking about the spirit body, again, we're talking about the spirit body because this is one of the early places that you can detect imbalance before imbalance enters your physical body. So we'll talk about our idea of what a sin is. And then we'll push this in the area of how you can look at this as it relates to your personal health. So, sins, right? What do we say? We already discussed earlier that shacking up and fornication was a sin. And if you're not religious, I understand, but it's still some societal rules that we govern ourselves by. Like, for example, you know, would nobody on here want their spouse to cheat on them, for example, or would no one would want their you know, to deal with somebody who's being dishonest. So we'll say that these things, you know, are sins. So we tend to assess what is a sin based on what we can see and what we can judge. That's kind of like this human nature that we go through of this is right or this is wrong. And then we have to, you know, go back into the mind, like I said, into the brain, and we, you know, we make our judgments. So let's get more into the unseen. I'm going to give you an example of, excuse me, unseen sin, or sin that may not just immediately trigger your mind because it's not written down in the book. But we're just talking about staying in alignment, and we stand talking about staying in integrity and staying in love and in that conscious energy and in your heart. So that's going to apply to every belief system that I know of so far. So let's give this example. Say you just left the doctor, right? And you get this prognosis of onset diabetes. Maybe you're overweight, maybe your cholesterol is high, your energy is low, everything. So you just got this information where you found out these are the things that's going on with my body. Now, we've all been around, we've watched TV, we watch commercials, we know how important our health is, or what, you know, types of thing constitutes as healthy or healthy behavior, right? But when you left the doctor, and you kept eating snacks and you kept drinking soda, and you know that it's bad for you. You were told what it could do, you know, to you. And you know from the media, everybody's talking about these things, but you still do it anyway. So to me, that sounds pretty sinful. That sounds like, you know, a sin that you're committing against your body. Because when we look at, like, going back to the definition of consciousness and God, and we know that consciousness is God and it dwells in the heart and it's in every cell, it's in every cellular function, it's everything that we're made of, it's everything that exists, you know, unless you're under some type of ignorance, which we all were. And I'm not even going to just leave it at ignorance, because there is a myriad of reasons why we we have some of the habits that we do, especially in the African American communities. And so a lot of times what we ate and how we moved, a lot of this stuff was in accordance with, you know, our finances, how much money we had, what we could actually afford. So it wasn't always about, you know, even just having the healthiest of choices. And so, like I said, I won't just say that it's ignorance, but some level of programming, even some level of availability, all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And so, back to our story here, we went to the doctor, we got this prognosis. We know that we got to do better. We know that we got to make better decisions, because guess what's happening? Plaque is lining your arteries, and that can become dislodged at any moment, where you're not getting proper blood flow, and then a heart attack could be on the horizon right there. And the reason that you're not doing anything to prevent it is because you are tempted by fried chicken and sugary foods and sweets. And so all the time, the temptation ain't gonna be talking about, it's not gonna be talking about alcohol. All the time, the temptation is not going to be talking about sex. It's not going to be talking about coveting someone's spouse. Sometimes the temptation is knowing that to be in alignment with God, for my body to feel good, for me to have the energy to get up these stairs, it would be beneficial for me to stop eating this way or modify these habits to the best of my ability so that I can be in integrity. So I do it all the time. It's a personal check. I invite you guys to do it. And it's to ask, are you sinning against your body with some of the habits and routines that you have? And then if we take that a step further, then we'll just say, do you have any room to judge anybody else? And so that helps us with some of those other spiritual components that we were talking about, because, you know, with that logic, we're not taking things so personally. We're not becoming so quickly enraged about, you know, other people's coping mechanisms and different things that they're doing. We're too focused on ourselves. And when you are and you get in that vibration, a lot of times you just change your experience here. It's funny, I was talking with a friend and I said, I just don't have the same experiences that other people have sometimes. So I had a job where I was working for AT&T, and it's not uncommon for you to get a customer that's enraged and that's cussing you out and that's fussing and that's mad at their bill. But all of the time I worked there, I never got those customers. When I worked in the school system, they talk about how bad the kids were and the kids be doing this and the kids be cussing people out and all different type of stuff. And as long as I worked in the school system, I did not have that experience. And so I'll even hear people talk about their interactions with other people. And I go, I don't have these experiences. And so I feel like the vibration that we are at and the vibration that we embody kind of dictates the type of experiences that we have. And to go even a little bit more in depth than that, there was a time in my life where I got really serious about it because I was going through such a stressful time. I didn't want to do anything begrudgingly. So I would really wait. I realized, like, if somebody asked me to do something and I really didn't want to do it, that's the time when, you know, somebody rear end me, or that's the time when, you know, some nonsense happened and it's like, I shouldn't have been doing that anyway. And maybe the whole lesson was just to learn how to say no, or maybe how to set healthier boundaries. And so, you know, getting in this synergy of understanding what we have to do for ourselves, you know, when we're giving ourselves the grace and we're understanding what we need for self, it's almost automatic to give other people grace. When I meet people who are very critical, I'm assuming that they're probably 10 times more harsh and critical toward themselves. And so we work on our relationship with ourselves, and usually that's just gonna, you know, transcend externally anyway. And so back to sin. You know, I mean, I know one of the seven deadly sins is like gluttony, but we'll just say overindulgence, especially overindulgence in things that we just kind of know, you know, that we shouldn't be doing. And just because sugar is, you know, FDA approved, white sugar, it's just not good for anybody. I'm gonna just be honest. There is a term, it's called okasatmia, and it's something that I use in my Vedic wellness practices. And it's to say you may not stop at cold turkey. I'm not saying just because I said this, you got to go home and throw all the sugar in the cabinet away or anything like that. Your body is used to it at this point. So that term is basically like synonymous with weaning. You know what I'm saying? Weaning yourself off of, you know, whatever unhealthy habit or behavior. But at this point, when we look at how many diseases are affected with our food intake, our sugar intake, and everything else, like white sugar is probably killing more people than crack or cocaine or any of these things that we've just judged and we just classified. Not saying that you shouldn't judge and classify those things, but what I'm saying is there's, you know, our own front porches that we have to sweep around to be able to really embody the vibration of change. And so Give me just a minute, y'all. I'm driving, so I'm turning off. Give me a second. Okay, sorry about that, guys. The multitask is really real right now. And so what I was saying before is, like I said, that sugar is can be really bad for your body, and it is responsible for a lot of the illnesses that we see in our present day. And those illnesses, if you put them all together and what's going on in those situations with the foods that we eat and the stress that we're under and we're carrying, it really is. I think, I haven't done the actual numbers, but killing more people than drug overdoses are. It's just that it's just stretching you out over a longer period of time. And so we do want to think about what things are natural, because sugar is common, but it's not really natural. It's not a very natural substance. So when we think about things that's what's natural, what will put us in alignment, what's pleasing to God, of course you're going to have to try some different things and see what's working for you. For example, if you say, okay, um I know that I shouldn't have acidic foods, but I really like orange juice. And you know what? I feel like I can't just stop it cold turkey right now. So I'm gonna have a little cup of orange juice with my meal, with my breakfast, Monday through Friday. But on the weekends, I'm not gonna drink orange juice anymore. And so, you go all day Saturday and all day Sunday, you don't drink orange juice, and you notice that you've done this over some period of time, and you like, man, I really be feeling good on Monday morning. You'll be able to see the pattern of, if I took this thing away, is it making me feel better, based on your idea, thoughts, and how it's actually physically playing on your body. Like, you'll be able to see what's in alignment for you, because when we talk about diet, we'll get into that some more. Diet is a little bit different for everybody, or what somebody's body type may need, or what type of foods they, are actually healthy for them or good for them. But when we're thinking about just um natural flow or being in alignment, when I think of God, I do think of nature. I do think of natural things. I do think of creation. So let's think about this, for example. Before we had the colonization of saying, hey, let's all build houses in this dwelling and we're going to live here. We all had, grade school history and geography. So we know that there were something called hunters and gatherers. People would just move, there was no agricultural revolution at that point where people are mass producing corn and potatoes and stuff like that. No, you just kind of navigated the terrain. And if you saw fruit bearing trees over here, you saw new vegetables, you kind of tried it out, and you got your nuts and berries and different things like that. And so when we thinking about the hunting and gathering time of life, then we you weren't really eating meat. Meat came into play, for example, when you were a hunter and gatherer and you were moving through terrains like Michigan. In the winter, when it's cold and you need more, because you can't just go out and forage for your fruits and your nuts or whatever it is that you may be looking for, then it's like, no, you're gonna have to kill a little small animal. And guess what? It's going to take a lot longer to digest that meat than it would take for you to digest the fruits or the nuts that you may have had. And so that's working for you in that season, because you may have to have that meat for a few days, before you can go out and hunt again. So, like, the things that were eaten and that were consumed during that time, it made sense. Okay. You ate based on what fruits were growing in the area. So let's say if you're in this area that's in a rainy season, or it's very humid, and these type of fruits grow in this season, these type of fruits are going to be nourishing to you, the person that's existing in that season. But now, if you want to eat strawberries. It don't matter if that's growing for you right now. That's just imported from somewhere else. A lot of our fruits and vegetables can be imported, from another place, and we eat it because it tastes good. It doesn't really have anything to do with if that's in alignment for the season that we're in and the space that we're living in. And so following kind of the natural laws of nature will keep you more in alignment. And if it's not to the point where you're gonna be going to the grocery store to be like, hey, what fruits actually in season and what's locally grown here? And there are people that's like that, but you don't necessarily have to be to that point. But if you are at least at a point where you can say, somebody told me that this affects my body this way. Let me cut back on that for 7 days and see if I actually feel better. And if I actually feel better, let me discipline myself to not do that. Let me discipline myself to, see if I'm going to have more energy or more vitality. And it truly is a discipline, because if you got the taste for bacon, you can just go get bacon every day. You could just go, and then not only can you get it every day, um, it's on demand at the nearest market near you, the closest market to you. You can get bacon. You don't have to go very far. You don't even know where the bacon came from. You don't know, how if it was shipped to you in proper refrigeration before it made it to your table. And I know I'm saying all of these things. Just, yeah, pray over the food. That's what I say. You just have to pray over the food as we continue to go through these transitions of figuring out, what's actually healthy for us. And so I hear a lot of people, especially when I'm talking to some of my older friends, we always laugh and joke about the young people, because we'll call them like the microwave generation, or they want everything and they want it right now, and they're kind of impatient very much with the instant gratification. But we've all kind of followed that same trend, because we're not going out to go hunt our own food. Somebody else can do that. We'll get it from the grocery store. We'll keep it fresh. We'll buy a refrigerator. We have all of these, different technologies, so that we're not even, responsible for, creating these things that we consume. I had an experience with the boys when we were in Peru, and a lot of people where we were, they didn't have refrigerators. The locals, they didn't have refrigerators, but it was like, markets, most things were in walking distance. But you just go get what you need to eat for the day, what you gonna cook for the day, maybe for 2 days. But you weren't stocking up. You got time every day, and then you also cooking a meal from pretty much scratch as well. But we're only able to take back, we're walking, what we could carry by hand. I always tell people, the lady always asks the boys, um, para hoy or para mañana, for today or for tomorrow, whenever we buy avocados, because that's going to determine which ones they sell to you. If you want it today, it's going to be more ripe. If you saying you want to have it for tomorrow, they'll sell you one that's a little bit more firm. But that they never asking you for the week. They never asking you for 3 days. Like, they're on a system. And so they also work, they had things to do, but their body is accustomed to the walk and the preparing the food. And I can honestly say, like, I felt really, really healthy during that time where I'm preparing my own meals from scratch, and I'm doing a lot of walking and not really using a lot of refrigeration or microwaves that also, affect our food. There was another thing that I was thinking of. Sorry there, lost my train of thought for a second. But just to kind of tie it back in, I'm looking at the time too, y'all. That's why I got anxious, because I'm like, got a lot to say today. But going back to seeing where we kind of started this, there is a lot of ways where we go against nature. And I mentioned it last week. The term that's used is called mistake of the intellect. So it's not always just, what's out here outside of us. That's just one aspect of it. But what's inside of us has to be taken care of for what's outside of us to even matter. Because as we know, a lot of people are passing earlier and earlier in life. And a lot of these diseases that we more associated with just like old age, we see happen to people at a younger and younger age. And so when we're manifesting, or we want to manifest good health, you know, I know that the Coke or the Pepsi is tasty, but if Coke can do what I've seen Coke do to an engine and some rust, it ain't no way you need that type of experience to digest your food properly, like warm water and tea will do. And so when you'll notice when you go to like other countries and stuff, they're not giving out a lot of soda. They're not giving out a lot of cold drinks and cold water. You know, people are sipping tea before and after meals. It's very common to have warm tea because the same thing when you feel like you gotta have that Sprite or whatever to chase whatever you ate with, like some warm tea kind of had the same effects. And so we're trying to manifest good health. So something that you guys can do, this not homework or nothing like that, but it's just a thought and it's something that I recommend to clients that are really trying to figure out what foods and what things really resonate with them and is best for them. You could do a food journal. My kids in the car, so I'm about to pick on one of them right now. And then I'm gonna ask you guys, you know, well, rhetorically, what you think about this. So one of my kids, I'm not gonna name any names, was on a hot Cheeto kick, spicy food, Takis, everything like that. And so he was spending a lot of time in the restroom and he confided in me that his butthole was indeed burning. And I said, boy, that's because you eating all of them hot chips, them spicy chips. And so even knowing that that was the consequence, the child still wanted to eat the chips. And so, you know, yeah, that be expected of a kid. And that's kind of where some of us got our bad habits from, you know, it not being really corrected at that time. So I always go back and I reiterate, like, okay, let's not eat that. Let's not have too much of that, or I'll have to cut it out, or I have to stop buying snacks for a while. And I'm like, no, not the hot chips, because they want to be satisfied by the taste buds. It tastes good to them. That's what they want to have, whether or not it's good for them. And so I'm just saying that to say that we, you know, as adults, we're all adults here. We got to be able to have we got to be able to have the self-discipline. And so we'll go through different things where we're doing this, not doing that, doing this, not doing that when it comes to our diet, but it's really about trusting God. Like there was a time when I was a vegan. I'm not saying anybody needs to be a vegan, but when I was a vegan, I was going under some serious, like I was under a lot of stress. The most stress that I really was in. So veganism, you know, resonated with me because a lot of the parasites or different things that you can get through animal products, I would have been more susceptible to getting sick because my immunity was weak because my stress was high. And so the way that I was kind of combating that was by eating better foods. Because if I would have, gave way under stress to a sweet addiction or just been, putting on, 50 pounds because I'm in emotional duress, that's also where you can manifest the diseases. So like I told you, and we'll get into this later, women, they commonly will manifest autoimmune disorders. And a lot of women that I've talked to that have manifested autoimmune disorders is actually a byproduct of their perception of a relationship being what I would consider like narcissistic. I know I hate that word sometimes because it's overused and it's misused, but this could be in a relationship with a spouse, a boss, a friend, whoever. But in those types of relationships, what happens is that that person who's in that more of a narcissistic attribute, they actually become your God in your life, where you're basing your worthiness and your worth off of their approval or their validation. And so it attacks you right there in the spirit body, the one that we talking about today, that creates imbalances. And like I said, it really will make a mess of your immune system. And so that's just kind of giving some examples. And, I'm willing to answer more questions on that. And like I said, we'll get into it in some of the other weeks. But everybody's going through different experiences. So when I do, get into the specifics about what people should be doing, all the clients have, different regimens that they have to go under because you're under different levels of stress. You have different habits and all of that. And so if you notice, sometimes the diseases, um, they follow the culture. So if you follow the trends through any history or any literature, whatever diseases are prevalent during that time, it's intertwined in what's going on during that time. And one of the things, for example, is a lot of the children that was born in times of war. So, like, if you had a child or you were born in like the late 60s, you're at higher risk of schizophrenia. You're at higher risk of manic depression. Why? Because when your mom was carrying you in the womb, we talked about this last time, she was in fear all the time. Her spouse was in the war. You never knew when you were gonna get bombed, or you just living in fight or flight. And so a lot of that manifested, to people through their wombs. And so when we think about these diseases, they're not just isolated attacks. They're not just isolated attacks like, oh man, I all of a sudden got, this or that illness. No, these are physical manifestations of our physiological imbalances. And so I'm looking at the time, y'all. I'm just about done here. I'm looking at the time, but I just kind of want to make sure that I'm wrapping it, tying it in. I'll go back and listen to it later, and if not, I'll make sure that I, start the next class. But when we talk about, these being the manifestations of our physiological imbalances, again, we're talking about our thoughts, our emotions, our behavior, our environment, kind of that definition that I gave you of, that holistic nature last week. And so one thing that we have, and this is probably something that stuck out to me in childhood in church, was, we have choices. And so we do have to evaluate, is it working for us? Is the situation working for us? The diet, the marriage, is it working for you? The job, what can you do? What can you do to change it so that, you're feeling better in those spaces? And so a lot of how we feel, how we think, how we view the world, you know, we as a people, we're a little bit brainwashed because of, capitalism and whatnot. And that's a whole nother class. So I won't go too deep into that. But our physical body, you know, I look at it like playing a game. Like the body is the avatar and it's being controlled by the spirit aspect. So based on your spirit and your spiritual alignment, you're giving this body energy, momentum, and that connection with God is telling you what to eat and where to go and what to do and how to be. And if you be in a charity and you working for God, then God's gonna do some things for you. And so let me just make sure. I want to do a little quick run through just a few of my other notes because some of it I'm going to skip over. Okay, so just to kind of go into the last tidbit, the positive thinking portion. Okay, so you do have to program your mind. When we're talking about the discipline, you have to program your mind to keep your thoughts positive. And so if you're a person that's more prone to being impatient, being anxious, worrying, all of those things, then that's when your spirit body actually, becomes imbalanced. You're not in alignment with God. And so like the Bible will tell you to pray without ceasing. Um, the monks will tell you to chant or to meditate. And we have all of these things, the praying, the meditating, the chanting, the silence, interrupting the thought patterns, because until you have control over your thoughts, you're just going to keep cycling through the same worry, through the same grief, through the same depression, and you may not know how to stop. And so you got to, like I said, chant, meditate, pray, whatever you need to do to stop it. And sometimes, if you're not trained to do those things, you may have to just go ahead and phone a friend. But if you do phone a friend, make sure it's the friend that's going to hold you accountable. Make sure it's the friend that's going to give you the perspective, that you need to keep you out of victimhood. This would not be the time to call the yes man. This will be the time, to really call that person that's going to keep it real, that's going to keep it light, that's going to keep you in the light and help really give you the perspective. And so last week I told you to think about some health goals that that you wanted to achieve and maybe narrow it down to just one that you want to accomplish over the next 12 weeks. And I'm doing this with you all as well. And so one of the things that we're actually doing is by logging in every week to be here to have this conversation, we're already doing something about the health goal that we have or whatever goal that you set. You're already doing something about it because you're disciplining yourself to be here. You're disciplining yourself to have this conversation with me. When I planned this class, I did not know that my kids were going to sign themselves up for flag football and have games every Thursday at the same time that I have class. But y'all, we got through it and we're going to continue. This class lasts longer than flag football season. So it won't be too many of these. I do apologize if I sound like super winded, rushed, anxious, out of breath, all of those things. I hope you were able to get the gist of the content. But this week's homework, like I said, we're already doing something about it. We're already taking action by being online. But this week, I just wanted to give you guys something to do to connect with your body. Just something to do to connect with your body. So I'm just gonna have this one ask of you. Cold drinks actually impede the digestive function. And when I say cold drinks, I mean the temperature of the drink if you put an ice in the water. And so I'll give you progressive things you can do. If you can just this week try it out, let me know how you feel. Not drink cold beverages, great. If that's asking a lot, then let's just see how we can wean ourselves into that. So maybe you can just not drink cold beverages before 10 a.m. So if you drink cold beverages before 10 a.m., maybe that's the thing that you can do because that's not really good. Okay, if you got to drink it cold, drink it between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. with natural law, that's when the sun is highest. The sun is fire. Fire is Agni. Agni is digestion. Your digestion is supported during 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. This is also where you should have your biggest meals, but I'm not going to load you guys with information. I'm sorry. I just be getting ahead of myself because we're just focusing on, just simple things at a time. So right now, if you feel like you got to have the cold drink, can you fit it between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.? If not, and it's after that, that's fine. But if you could at least not do it when you first get up in the morning, because that's when your digestive system is waking up and it's getting ready to have all these proper digestive enzymes so it can break down your food and your food doesn't turn into stored fat or any other thing, whether that be inflammation or all of those other things that we don't want to experience. Okay, so if you could at least not do it in the morning and not do it before you go to sleep. So just the homework for this week is we and me too. We're not going to do cold beverages. We'll welcome the tea. The coffee is a little but I'm not telling nobody not to drink their coffee. If you drink coffee, at least it's warm. If you could take your water at room temperature, that's great. If you do have any inflammation, within your body, you don't need to take the stuff too hot. If you're drinking tea, you need to let it cool. If you're drinking coffee, you need to let it cool because that when it's too hot, that actually can aggravate inflammation in your body as well. And so, or even if you're going through a menopausal experience, you don't have to have it too hot. You could just have it room temperature. But what I'm saying is if we can avoid ice this week, then we could really be on to something going into week 3. Okay, I'm looking at the time. It's 8:28. I'm going to allow you guys to interrupt me. There's so many things I could say. I would probably want to have you here for another hour, but I gotta go. Does anybody have questions? Anybody want to unmute comments? I'm taking them now. I gotta cut me off. Thanks, Paige.
What
Okay.
time in the evening, no cold drinks?
If you want to take it out to evening, at least not after 7 p.m. Not after 7 p.m. But 10 to 2 is ideal. But if it's after 2 and you have it, just try not to have it after 7. And the reason why is like it does take about 3 hours after your last meal to start really digesting before the digestive process is complete, beginning to end. And so a lot of times when we're eating late or doing unhealthy things late at night, this causes insomnia, this causes a myriad of other things. But during that time, like your body is supposed to just be able to rest. And if you just ate before you lay down, then your body is not resting. It's still working on digesting that food. Now you ate at 9 o'clock. It's working on that all the way into midnight. So you didn't really get the full restfulness of your experience. So yeah, 7 p.m. And tailor it to what time you go to bed, but not within the last 3 hours before you gonna go to bed. Any other questions, comments? Okay, I promise you guys, as we keep going, I know if I'm introducing new concepts, I'm trying to keep it, in layman's terms, easy to digest, easy to understand. But I want you guys, I want to encourage you guys to ask as many questions as you would like, but it will come together if there is any clarity that can be obtained and make, continue to come together in the upcoming weeks. All right. Well, I'm gonna close it out there. It looks like no other questions. If you do have any comments or things you think of later, you can always shoot me an email or a text. And I thank you guys again for your participation.